The basic Bootstrap navbar is just that. It's really basic. You've got this light gray background, and then you have the text that's either black or gray and changes when you mouse over it. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can customize it so you can incorporate the colors from your design for your site. This is the page and the basic layout that we're going to be working with for this particular video. Across the top, we actually have the basic Bootstrap navbar, but I've already styled it. So as I mouse over the individual navigation items, the background color changes to that lighter brown. You can see that here in Dreamweaver, the layout is pretty much set up with the exception of that navigation bar. Since it's a Bootstrap layout and we're adding a Bootstrap navigation bar, we need to have a grid row to put it in. With this layout, the navigation bar is directly above the header, so I need to first select my header. To do that, I can just click in the header area. Then I can click on the element display. That shows me that I have the div, and I can look at my code and see that's a div inside a header. Then I can hit my up arrow, and now my header is selected. Now I'm ready to add that grid row. I can come over to the Insert panel and then click Grid Row with Column. That brings up the Insert Row with Columns dialog box and asks me where I want to put this new row. I want it to be before the element that's currently selected, so I click Before, and I only want one column, so I change the 3 to a 1, and then I click OK. Before I can add the navigation bar in, I want to get rid of the actual column div that came with our new row. The basic Bootstrap navigation bar is responsive, so we're not going to need this at all. So just highlight it and delete it. I'm going to leave the div class row in place. That's fine as a container for our navigation bar. In fact, that's why we made the grid row to begin with. We wanted to get this particular bit of code right there. I'm going to put my cursor inside of that div, go back over to the Bootstrap components, this time go down to navigation and click on navbar, basic navbar, and it drops it right in there. And this should look super familiar. This is the one we just were looking at in the browser window a couple minutes ago. Our first task is going to be removing the elements from this navigation bar that we don't need. We don't need this thing that says NavBar. This is a branding area in this basic Bootstrap navigation bar where you could put like a small logo for your company. We don't need it. So I'm going to click on it and then click the element display. And then looking at my code, I'm going to try to figure out, am I in the right place? Am I only selecting this element that I see on screen when I hit delete? And I am. It has the A-class navbar brand, and then it has the navbar text that's showing up on screen. I can just go ahead and hit delete on my keyboard and get rid of that. We also don't need this home item on the navigation bar. This has some classes assigned to it that would create some problems for us if we forgot to remove them, and it's a little bit more hassle to go through and remove them than it is to just replace it with something else further down the road, so that's what we're going to do. I have it selected. I've clicked in the element display to make sure I have it selected, and I can also check down on my code selector here and select things that way. And now I have the entire list item that makes up the home button. So I can just hit delete, and that one goes away. I'm going to do the same thing for drop-down. The same thing for disabled. And then the same thing for this whole search area. All that's inside of this form. So I'm just going to click on form in the tag selector and then get rid of it. That leaves me with one link in the navbar. This link has classes applied to it that I want to have for my others. So to simplify things, I'm just going to copy and paste it a few times. Now we have 6 links for our navbar. The next phase in styling this navbar is going to be creating some new CSS rules to override the rules that come with the Bootstrap CSS file. To do that, we're going to have to write rules in a different CSS file. I already have one that I've created called coffeestyle.css. Inside of this file currently are all the rules that are governing the layout that you see on the screen. What I'm going to do is scroll to the very end of that CSS. In fact, let's bring it up in code view. And I want to show you what I have in here. I have all of the colors that I'm going to be using for the navigation links in the navbar. I also have some colors that are unused, darker browns, that I selected when I was picking my overall color scheme. I have these in here just because it makes it easier for me as I'm going through and making changes to have it in this document already. That way I can just copy and paste those hex values in where I need them in my CSS rules. Before we start writing any of our custom rules, we need to remove a class that's currently applied to the navigation element. I'm going to go back to split view and then also click on source code. I'm going to click on our navigation area, click on the element display in the blue part, so I get that blue line surrounding the element, and then I'm going to hit my up arrow until I'm up at the nav, and here I am. The entire nav is selected. What I'm looking for is this .bg-light rule. This is going to conflict with some of the rules that I'm going to write for the navigation, so I'm just going to remove it. We don't need it. The bg-light rule applies that light gray color we saw and some of the other styling for the bar, and is just part of the light gray color scheme that is one of the default schemes you can apply to the Bootstrap navbar. And by default, I mean they're the classes and styles that come with the CSS. There's also a dark one, and there's some others too that have some pretty bright colors that you can apply just by changing the rules. So with that removed from our navbar, we can start creating some of our own rules to incorporate our custom colors. Alright, here we are back in code view in our CSS file, and we're ready to make our first rule. This first rule is going to be class-based, and it's going to be called nav-custom. It's going to control the background color for our whole row that our navigation bar lives in. I've already copied the hex value for the color I need, so I'm just going to be able to paste that in. I'm going to switch to split view, but we're not going to see it applied yet. We haven't actually applied the rule, we'd only created it. So I'm going to go up and click in my nav, and then click on the element display. The blue part there. I'm going to use my arrows and go up and make sure that I have the right thing selected. I want to have the entire row that the navigation bar is inside of selected. I don't just want nav. With just nav selected, you can see the blue border that shows where the element actually exists. So it's not going across the entire screen. So I want that entire row to turn to the brown color I've set using our CSS. So hitting my up arrow, I'm able to get the entire row. This is the one I want, so I click plus, and then I'm going to type .nav. Then Dreamweaver is going to find all the rules that start that way. There's the one we just wrote. I can click on it, and now our background for the entire row, including the links, is that nice dark brown color. Back over in code view, we're going to write our next rule. This rule is going to control the text color for our links. This is one of the more complicated rules in the process. I already have it typed up in another window, so I'm just going to copy and paste it over to save a little time. And then I'm going to take a quick screen grab so we can take a look at this bit of code alongside the HTML so you can understand how it actually is working. With both our HTML open and the screenshot I made of the CSS code, I want to explain to you why we don't have a space between navbar nav and Mr. Auto. We don't have a space essentially because what we're saying to the browser is when an element has the navbar nav and Mr. Auto applied to it, that's why there's no space, and then with the space it has a descendant that has the nav item applied to it, that has a descendant that has the nav link applied to it. Change the color of the text to this color, which is kind of a tannish color. And that's what we have here. We have an unordered list element that has both classes assigned to it. So as we reference it here in the CSS, no space. And then that same element has descendants, the li element, that has the nav item assigned to it. And that li has a descendant of a that has nav link assigned to it. So that's why the spacing's a little bit different. And now we have those links all that nice light tan color. Now let's add another rule that will change the background color when we hover over those links. This is another rule that's a little bit longer, so to save time, I'm going to paste it in from another document. You'll see that it's also a rule that has the same structure as the previous one, where we're looking for an element that has both of those classes assigned to it, and then has a descendant that has this class assigned to it, that then has a descendant of A, and then we're going to affect the hover state of A, so the link. And that's how we're going to do it, by changing the background color to this particular color here. Back in split view, we can run the mouse over those and see that they've changed. With both of these rules that we've just written, we haven't created any new classes. We've taken advantage of the classes that are already there, and by using them in this way, we've used them more specifically than Bootstrap had when they were originally applied through their CSS, so our rules are overriding the Bootstrap rules. I'll add our next rule while we're here in split view. This rule is going to center the navigation in the middle of the screen, so all those links will be right in the middle of the screen. So for this, I'm going to create a brand new rule. So nav-align is what I'm going to call it. And I'm going to use that same process that we use when we want to center like an entire container div in the middle of a browser window. 0 auto. Since this is a brand new rule, I have to apply it. And in this case, I need to apply it to the nav element. So I have my nav element selected. I hit the plus, do .nav. I can select it from that list now, and there we go. Let's change the name of our links. I'm just going to slide this down so we can see the browser window that has the finished version behind it, so I can see all those. I'm just going to change them in the HTML. You might have noticed that these words aren't all the same length, so when we mouse over them, we actually have boxes that are a little bit different size. So let's normalize that. Let's make it so that that box that appears when we hover is the same. Essentially, what we're going to do is make it so that each of those list items has the same width to it. And we'll do that with our CSS. For this rule, we're going to rely on another rule that we've already created and applied, as well as two different HTML elements. So I'm going to call it nav custom, which we have a rule for already that's applied, and then here are the two elements that we're going to be drawing on, li and a. So to apply that width to all of these links, we just use the width property, and I'm going to do a width of 100 pixels. I think that'll probably be enough. And we can see up above in the live view that now we have things spaced out so that they're evenly distributed based on that width. So everything has the same width background color when you mouse over it. It looks nice except for the fact that they're not in the center. That looks kind of weird. Come back to our rule and do text-align : center, and we can take care of that. So now all those are centered up. They look pretty nice. When you mouse over, you can see the background color for each link doesn't extend up to the total height of the row our navigation bar is in. It's constrained by that nav element. We can change that pretty easily while we're here in our CSS. I'm going to do that with the NavBar rule, which already exists in the Bootstrap CSS. I'm just going to be overriding it by saying change the padding to 0 pixels for anything that has the navbar applied to it. So now my navbar isn't quite as tall, right? It lost a little height, but now when I mouse over, I have my background color going all the way up to the top and down to the bottom. If I want that to be a little bit bigger, what I can actually do is go back to that rule we were just in, the nav custom lia rule, and I can add some padding for the top and bottom end. Let's say 10 pixels. And then I'll do Padding for the bottom as well. And that makes it just a little bit taller. And if you want it taller, of course, you can just increase those numbers, right? So our top just got to be a little bigger, and so at the bottom, here we are. Let's save everything and take a look at this in the browser window. Well, there we are. Things look pretty good in the web browser. As we mouse over the links, we can see that the background color is changing just like it should. In the next video, I'll show you how you can make some additional customizations to change how the navigation looks on different screen sizes for things like, smartphones and tablets. Keep an eye out for the video called Customizing the Bootstrap Basic NavBar Part 2.